Hello and welcome to the Last Word on Spurs. We are your multi-award winning podcast. We are back. I'll even tell you this quicker than what I expected to be here. And I say we're joined. It's been an emergency panel here. You can obviously clearly see. If you're here for the first time, you can find us on iTunes. We're on Spotify. We're across all major audio platforms. We're of course on X. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook, and we're on Blue Sky too. We're joined by a star-studded panel. And can I just say at the very, very top of this show, we're joined by Mike over from the Ealing Road Podcast, multi-award winning Brentford podcast. That, bless him, can I just say, was meant to be coming on here to give us an insight into Thomas Frank. He wasn't meant to be coming on here on the day in which they've lost Thomas Frank to Tottenham, but Spurs have gone and got their man. Thomas Frank is officially Tottenham Hotspur's new head coach. And like I say, it's going to be a fascinating journey for Thomas Frank. Will he get past season 3? What do we make of the project? We understand he has signed a 3-year contract with the football club. Helping me break down to decipher all things Tottenham, I'm joined by the wonderful Jim, first of From Spurs. Jim, lovely to have you here. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thanks. Good evening, everyone. So much has happened in the last few hours, which I'm looking forward to chatting about.
Quite literally. Also back on the show, we've got the wonderful Ash Matic over at the Spurs Kings. Ash, how are you? Thanks for making this work.
Yes, people, man. Thanks for having me back on, Ricky. And big up to Jim and our lovely guest, Mike. Let's get into this Thomas Frank business, man. I want to know a lot about him.
We do. Absolutely. One man that's going to help us do that, we've obviously got the wonderful Mike over from the Ealing Road Podcast. Mike, firstly, thank you so much for coming on. Let's start with you. I mean, your immediate reaction, if you can, tell us how you feel to Thomas Frank leaving Brentford after what he's been one of the most longest serving managers in the Premier League. And not to put words in your mouth, am I right in saying probably the greatest manager in Brentford's history?
Yeah, spot on. I've had better days, to be honest, lads. I've had a better spell of 4 days, to be honest. But yeah, it's been a weird one because it's kind of been. We know that it's going to be. We've known that it's going to be happening for a while now. But when you see the tweets, when you see the Instagram posts, it really does kind of sink in. I think as Brentford fans, we can all agree that Thomas Frank definitely deserves this move. But yeah, it's definitely when it happens, when you see the tweets, when you see the Instagrams, it definitely cuts that little bit deeper. So yeah, we're all gutted, but we'll be all right, I'm sure.
Mike, we can't thank you enough for being here. This will be the painful bit out of the way. I'm going to quickly read the statement and then we are going to move on for Mike's benefit. I tell you, what a night. What a night. Tottenham have announced, as I said, the signing of Thomas Frank, their new manager. The club statement read, "We are delighted to announce the appointment of Thomas Frank as our new head coach on a contract that runs until 2028. Thomas has extensive experience in English football, having joined Brentford in 2016, since becoming one of the longest-serving current managers in the Premier League. During his time at Brentford, he transformed the club, moving them up from the Championship to an established Premier League side, consistently and significantly outperforming expectations for an extended period of time. In Thomas, we are appointing one of the most progressive and innovative head coaches within the game. He has a proven track record in player and squad development, and we look forward to him leading the team as we prepare for the new season ahead. Thomas will be joined from Brentford by Justin Cochrane, Chris Haslam, Joe Newton, and Andreas Georgson. And just so I read out their respective titles, Justin joins as first team assistant coach. It's a welcome return to Justin, who of course was with us during a very, very early period for the club in a youth setting. So great to see him back at the club. Chris Haslam has a title of head of performance and first team assistant coach. Joe Newton, first team coach analyst, with Andreas Georgson joining as first team assistant coach. I'm sure we're going to come on to those particular men and more in terms of what they do in more specifics as the show goes on. But Joe, I'm going to throw it over to Jim to kick us off, because I know there's quite a lot of questions Jim and Ash will have for Mike, who's got to, quite literally think on his feet here, given I don't think even he was expecting this news in the last few hours, but it's been inevitable, it's fair to say, for the last few days. Jim, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks. Evening, Mike. One of the main questions I think Spurs fans are looking to get an answer to is, like, Ange Ball was a big term, right? With Ange, it was all about playing a specific way and executing on that in a more extreme way. than anyone else could, and almost overwhelming your opposition to a point where there was no counter to a style. Well, it doesn't feel like there's a Frank Ball, right? There's more Frank's balls. He seems to have multiple ways he'll look at a game, and we've heard he completely will change a system depending on who's available. You had injury crises, I think, which your fan base feel may have been overlooked by the mainstream media, when other clubs' injuries were quite amplified in the mainstream media. Can you tell us a bit about Frank's playing styles and what you make of those kind of, images of him?
I think the key thing to understand with Thomas Frank is that I think if you look back at sort of when we were in the Championship, that's definitely his preferred style of play. I think sort of front foot attacking football for the 2 seasons that we were in the Championship under Frank, his first full season, we were the top scorers in the Championship. We lost out in the playoff final, and then the second season we were the top scorers again. But that's the kind of preferred football that he likes to play. But like you mentioned, it changes from game to game. It changes from season to season. I feel like when we came up to the Premier League, he quickly realised that you can't get points playing the way that we were playing in the Championship. And that's when you saw the kind of differences in formation, be that a 5 at the back or a 3 at the back, however you want to spin it. And crucially, the whole time when we were playing that formation, it was more passive, it was more defensive, but we were still able to pick up points and comfortably stay in the Premier League that season. But I think what you've seen recently from Thomas Frank in this current season is a kind of reversion to type. And it's probably that iteration of Brentford that you'll see at Spurs in terms of playing the ball along the ground a lot more, slow build-up play. We're very quick in transition this season. But particularly in those first couple of seasons, the first one we finished 13th, the second one we finished 9th. It wasn't a boring style of play. It wasn't that we were in a low block all the time. It was really exciting. We had Ivan Toney. We played to his strengths a lot. We were far more direct. But it's good that you mentioned Ange, because I feel like the whole kind of the story with Ange was him being wedded to his system. With Thomas Frank, it's the complete opposite. He's not wedded to a system. There's not a tactical identity per se. It's more about pragmatism and getting points. And I feel like what you're going to see from Thomas Frank with better players at his disposal is obviously that front foot attacking football. But at the heart of it, it's getting the best out of the players that he's got. And I feel like we'll probably go on to it, but Thomas Frank's record of improving undervalued players in Brentford's case, but improving attacking players overall is outstanding. It's phenomenal. And that's what you've seen reflected in some of the transfer fees that Brentford have picked up over the last kind of 5-6 years.
Ash, I'll let you come in on that point. I know, again, we've got a lot of questions for Mike. Let me hand over to you.
Yeah, Mike, how's it going, man? Hope you're good. We've got a question for you. And Ange Postecoglou was adored by the players, and they were leaving messages after they found out he was sacked. Some of them were quite shocked still, but I think every single player sent over a message to Ange Postecoglou. Looking from the outside in, it looks like Thomas Frank had a similar relationship with his players. And from what I've read or heard, I've heard this no dickheads policy. Now, moving into Tottenham Hotspurs, how do you think he's going to be able to manage these players that loved Ange Postecoglou? Do you think he's going to have enough about him to sway these players and influence them and get them on board quickly? Because there are a few South American players that are a bit fiery. And I was wondering if there was a case at Brentford where he had to manage an ego or two, or were they all nice guys? Was it all happy at Brentford?
Well, you guys will know firsthand that we had an infamous villain in our team that scored at your stadium a couple of seasons ago, Neil Mopay. And him and Thomas Frank had a really good relationship as well. It is a good question, though. And it's kind of a similar situation that current players at Brentford will face with the new manager, having Thomas Frank having been at the club for so long. But in a similar way that you've seen all of the messages from Tottenham players and the kind of outpouring of emotion, we haven't had that yet from Brentford players. There was an Instagram post from Pontus Jansson, who used to play for us a while ago, but left to go back to Sweden a couple of seasons ago. And I would recommend all Spurs fans watching this right now to go and look at the message that he sent Thomas Frank on Instagram in terms of changing his career, which is crazy for a player like Pontus Jansson, who came from Leeds United, who are a massive club in and of themselves. For Thomas Frank to kind of not reinvigorate, because he was already a very good player, but to change his kind of career path and take him with us on this journey into the Premier League. But that would be the same for every single Brentford player. If you hear Brian and Beaumont and Johan Wissa talk about Thomas Frank in interviews. They only have good things to say to him. And what I think Tottenham fans will enjoy is that if there are these players that perhaps are the dickheads in the squad, Thomas Frank will bring out, he inspires that connection between the players and the fans. It all kind of works together. That's why it's so devastating to be losing a man like that, because, and granted, he's been at Brentford for a very long time, but he's been able to be that kind of bridge between the owners, the players, and the fans, and he's the kind of center of it all. So I don't think he'll have any trouble in kind of swaying the dressing room. I think if you speak to people that he knows, if you speak to people within the club, they'll all tell you that first and foremost, he's a brilliant person. And then secondly, he's a brilliant coach as well. So I don't think he'll have any trouble with that. But obviously it will be tough going into a dressing room that's been, so kind of emotionally invested in the project with Ange.
I have to ask this question, Mike. I mean, Brentford is a fairly stable football club in terms of there being a clear structure and alignment, a word that I know Frank uses a lot, that runs throughout the club. I think it's fair to say at a club like Tottenham, and certainly in these more recent years, there's a real instability and a real lack of alignment between the fans to the board. Are you personally surprised that Frank has opted to join Tottenham, where arguably could he have waited out, I wouldn't say for a better opportunity, but I think there were links to the likes of Chelsea and Manchester United. There've been interest around his services. How surprised are you that he's jumped at the opportunity of joining Tottenham? Look, as us as fans, we love the football club, but for you as an outsider that is a Brentford fan and you've described this guy as the best manager in your lifetime, how surprised are you that he's opted for Tottenham, in which, let's be honest about it, is a less stable club, boardroom level, than Brentford are?
I think in terms of the move to Tottenham, and I've seen a few Brentford fans saying he should hold out, but I think let's have it right. If Tottenham come calling on, the wages that they're going to pay him, first of all, but Champions League football as well, and just to go from a club the size of Brentford to a Tottenham, it's a complete no-brainer. In terms of him holding out for a better or a bigger opportunity, I have said on a lot of pods that I've been on recently, is that in terms of his trajectory as a manager, the only way is up. Going into a club like Tottenham, where there is this instability in terms of the ownership and maybe not as much synchrony, well, definitely not as much synchrony in terms of the management structures there are at Brentford, it is a bit of a risk. It's a risk on both sides. And that's the one area where I think maybe it could fall down. I think you don't want another kind of one day Ramos situation where the structures were in place at Sevilla for him to be very, very good. It's a similar situation in that the structures are in place at Brentford so that everyone's singing off the same hymn sheet. He's almost just part of that well-oiled machine in terms of the recruitment structure, in terms of the players coming in. We've got this data-led approach led by Phil Giles and Lee Dykes, and Thomas Frank always gets the final say on players. But I mean, you guys know better than me in terms of the situation with Daniel Levy.
That won't be the case at Tottenham. That won't be the case at Tottenham. I mean, when I say that won't be the case, I mean, I think it'll be a more collective approach in the way they'll be signing players. And that's, I think one of the key things as I bring it over to Jim, who's probably got another question for you. I think that's been one of the key things that, has been a case over Spurs, that there's been a lot of club signings that have been put there by the club, not necessarily ones that maybe the manager would have wanted. I mean, that's probably one of Frank's skills, that he's got the best out of what he's worked with. So, Jim, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, just a little bit more on the recruitment structure. I'm curious to know, has there been examples of times where Frank has kind of quite clearly been after something that he feels he needs for the squad and it hasn't come to fruition in that transfer window? Because we've had that, and that's been one of the reasons for certain managers falling out with the ownership, is they take a more long-term view sometimes, and the manager takes a more short-term view on what they need, obviously, because they want to succeed in the short term. Is there examples of that happening in Frank, and how did he handle it, if so?
Well, I think the two most relevant examples are Brennan Johnson and Archie Gray, two players that we tried. Well, Thomas Frank tried his best over about 3 windows, maybe 2 windows, I want to say, to get Brennan Johnson to Brentford. But that kind of, I wouldn't say it would have been a conflict. It would have been a case of, well, in Spurs, in Archie Gray and Brennan Johnson's case, it's a case of Spurs coming in and hijacking a deal. But I don't think, whenever I've heard them speak about the recruitment structures in place, is very, very methodical. I don't think that they would go after a player that maybe Thomas Frank didn't fancy in the first place. He had the last say on transfers, but obviously we've got this massive department that are scouting over I think it's close to 100,000 players. Someone, Brentford fan in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong, but I've heard them quote that they've got this scouting network that's just unbelievable and worldwide. But the thing is, they'd have been given a brief by Thomas in terms of these are the players that I want, these are the profiles that I want, and we kind of go from there. But he always had the final say on it. But yeah, I wouldn't say there's been sort of conflicts without being, I'm not an ITK or anything like that, but I wouldn't say there's been conflicts per se. But there's definitely been times where we haven't got a player that Thomas Frank wanted, and obviously the two obvious ones are Archie Gray and Brennan Johnson.
Technically, he got them eventually. But...
Yeah, exactly.
Go on, Ash. We'll pick over to you. Let's hand it back over to you, Ash.
Yeah, I want to talk about his record of approving attacking players, and what you think he could bring to Spurs. Obviously, you can mention like some of the players that you've seen improve, and your thoughts on how that could translate over.
Yeah, I think that's like something. Whenever I've been making content around sort of Thomas Frank, ever since the news kind of started to break, that's one thing I really wanted to hammer home in terms of that record of improving attacking players might not be something that non-Brentford fans don't know about. But as soon as Thomas Frank came to the club, it became very clear that that was his thing, because he improves defensive players as well. But when you look at the caliber of players that Brentford have signed, Ollie Watkins was the first one. We signed him from Exeter as a left winger. Thomas Frank was the one that converted him into a central striker. He then went on to score 25 goals in the Championship, scored for England in the Euro semi-final. He's had the career that he's had. Another one, Said Benrahma, obviously didn't work out for him at West Ham, but genuinely, he was one of, if not the best player I've ever seen play for Brentford. And it was a shame that he kind of went to West Ham after that, because I don't think he was really a Moyes player. But when he came to Brentford, he was very raw. And then in his second season, he was the Championship player of the season. And again, another one that had a really, really strong relationship with Thomas Frank. In terms of recently, Brian MBUEMO, I'm sure we might talk about him in a bit, but Brian MBUEMO's been at the club for 6 years now. And his kind of transformation from Ivan Toney's understudy a little bit, and I'll talk about Ivan Toney as well, but Ivan Toney's understudy a little bit, but the maturity in his game now to kind of step up in Ivan Toney's wake and become Brentford's main man, score 20 goals for us this season. He's come on leaps and bounds. And then obviously the big one's Ivan Toney. I mean, Thomas Frank was instrumental in getting him to the club. There's been so many reports. I think we actually tried to sign him before we ended up actually signing him. And Thomas Frank said, if you come to us, you'll score 30 goals. And if we don't go up, then you'll get your Premier League move. If you come to us and score 30 goals, I'm confident we'll go up. And we did. And he stayed. And, obviously he's in Saudi now, but I would have loved him to get a big move when he left us. That gambling ban really derailed his whole career. But that record, when you look at the caliber of those players, maybe the only one that you could say hasn't gone on to kind of tear up any branches was Said Benrahma. But in terms of Ollie Watkins, Ivan Toney, and there's more players to come. That's the thing with Brentford signings. Kevin Schade is another one that's popped up this season. He's started to contribute a lot of goals. There's just more to come. And I feel like there's something, it goes back to his man management. There's something about him that brings the best out of these attacking flair players, which is why I think Spurs fans should be really excited about what Brennan Johnson can do next season under Thomas Frank, considering how heavily they pursued him for the best part of a year.
Just on that really quickly, on that Brennan Johnson point, do you think, because from what I've seen, he likes to play the forward players inverted, so he will play a right footer on a left-hand side and a left footer on the right-hand side, and he play him a lot closer to the box compared to how Ange had them out wide on the wings. Do you think that maybe you could see a different role for Brennan Johnson, maybe playing on the left-hand side, or am I reading too much into it where Brennan Johnson would probably stay on the right anyway and play in that little pocket?
It's difficult to know, because when we were linked with Brennan Johnson, I'm not sure Brentford fans were 100% on where he'd end up playing for Brentford, or whether Thomas Frank wanted to convert him into a central striker almost. But no, you're spot on in terms of how his role could change under Thomas Frank, going over to the left and then cutting him from the right. Because this season with Brentford, it's been about crosses and getting the ball in central areas, creating high XG chances. That's been the mantra this season. Whenever, I think we've got the most crosses in the Premier League this season, we've got the highest conversion rate in terms of chances in the box, and the majority of our shots come from that kind of middle third of the penalty area. So in terms of that role switching, it then leaves a convenient space open on the right-hand side, which probably is a good segue to talk a little bit about Brian MBUEMO and the rumours there.
Well, listen, on that point, I mean, feel free to, Mike, because I'm going to bring Bill in as well. One of all Billie T's in the house. Bill, lovely to have you here. It's an emergency crisis podcast. Because we did in the world of Tottenham, it's all happened in the background. I've got to say, it's all happened in the background. We'll fill you guys in later, but whilst we've got Mike here, Bill, firstly, how are you? Lovely to see you here.
Yes, guys,
Tottenham
good, man. I'm buzzing, man. Yeah.
Buzzing and excited. Bill,
Yeah,
we're going to
I
ask
am,
you to think of a question. We're going to ask you to think of a question for Mike. Before I do, initial thoughts for you, Bill, on the appointment of Thomas Frank. How do you feel for you on the appointment itself?
Yeah, I'm genuinely excited. I think he's the right man. Seems like a really sensible decision. I still have a bit of tinge of sadness for Ange, obviously, after what we went through in Bilbao. I think it would have been an interesting decision to see what would happen next season. But that as time goes on, that's kind of made me realize that, this might probably be able to protect that legacy that he had and always go down as a hero. So, yeah, that's good. And I think Thomas Frank is an excellent coach. So, yeah, I'm excited to see what it brings, man.
Yeah, I got to say, Mike is filling us in real detail on that point. So, Bill, I'll ask you to maybe think of a question for Mike whilst we've got him for a few more minutes. And, Mike, the one thing I want to ask you, and maybe it's difficult for you to answer this, but, I mean, many are talking about the element of stepping up to a bigger club in Tottenham. And I know it's a conversation that you also had on the Ealing Road podcast recently, whether he would be able to manage that. I asked you earlier about working with more of an unstable board in Tottenham in comparison to Brentford. The reality is at Tottenham in terms of the upcoming season, he's never played in the Champions League before. He's never going to have as many games as what he's been used to in the Premier League and in competitions with regards to European football as well. How do you feel he's going to handle that adjustment in itself? And that's before with the obstacles and the tasks that come at Tottenham, because he seems an excellent communicator, a very driven human being. I love the no dickheads policy. I think if everyone's gone and watched the High Performance podcast, A Day with Thomas Frank at Sky, they're seeing a man that's a very smart, intelligent human being. But I'd love to know from you how you feel he's going to deal with the difference of exposure from Brentford to Tottenham in terms of the manner of results and how much they're going to be highlighted to such in-depth detail at a club like Tottenham.
Yeah, I think I was listening to a different podcast the other day, and they were talking about how Thomas Frank's kind of ethos is you take 24 hours to get over a result, win or lose, good times or bad times. At Tottenham, that's not going to be the case, unfortunately. So he might have to kind of ditch that ethos, but it's going to be, it's an unknown, right? It's an unknown. I think in terms of kind of competing on all fronts and dealing with that kind of congested fixture calendar, firstly, he has to be backed. And I can speak for most Brentford fans when I say that I want him to do well. And I think the first thing the first thing that he needs to get in place for him to be able to do that is to be backed. In terms of how he's going to deal with that, playing that level of football all the time, I think if there's any evidence to suggest that he can, you only need to look back to a couple of seasons ago when Brentford played against the top six and had the best record against the top six in the league. So in terms of those teams, in terms of those Champions League level teams, from the evidence that we have, maybe when you could argue when Brentford are at their best, as you can see on the graphic there, that season was phenomenal in terms of going to Manchester City and doing the double over the treble winners, beating Man United 4-0 at home. Some of these beating you guys at your place towards the end of the season. Some of these results were they were remarkable for a club like Brentford to be able to get. So in terms of but that's what I mean. Of the evidence that we have, which is very limited, of Thomas Frank competing at the top level, he's doing it with a club and with players that aren't at that level, technically. He's overperformed with those players to get those results. So if that's the evidence that we're taking, he should be able to handle top-level football. The only thing that you need to add into that, and I say the only thing like it's a small thing, but it is the scrutiny, and that's something that we haven't seen. Because at Brentford, you can lose a game, and, the fans won't care that much. Because we're that wedded to Thomas Frank, and we've completely adored him for the last 7 years. Whereas at Spurs, if he and I've mentioned this so many times, Thomas Frank lost 8 out of his first 10 games at Brentford. There is no way in hell he gets afforded that kind of time at Tottenham. And he started really badly at Brøndby as well, which is something I'm really worried about, because if he does start poorly, it only takes so long for the Ange kind of whispers to start coming back.
Well, Mike, let's quickly ask you on that. Have you, when Frank went through that adversity period, even regardless of what expectations are at any club, 8 losses in 10, your fans are going to get nervous about the R word and relegation, right? Mm-hmm. So some are naturally going to turn, no matter how reasonable you are, emotions take over. How does he handle those kind of moments? Because Ange, there were some fans who really dug in and kind of, you know, you can understand why he's being frustrated in the media and his demeanor's changing, all that kind of stuff. How does Frank typically behave in those challenging periods? Do you think he'll push back, or is he very kind of hands up and reflective?
I think in that first 10-game spell, we were all very worried. We were thinking we'd made the wrong decision. But I think, and it kind of ties back into what we were saying about management structures, the underlying numbers were good and that they knew it would improve. So they didn't make a rash decision. In terms of Thomas Frank, there was a period sort of in the back end or the kind of middle part of the first season in the Prem, where injuries and in the third season as well, injuries last season were horrendous, almost like at the level of your guys this season. But he does get a little bit prickly sometimes. That there was a moment where we went 1-0 down against Chelsea at home last season when we were in the midst of a massive injury crisis, and apparently there were boos. There were boos from a small section of the fan base, and he came out in the press conference afterwards and called them out for it. Having said that, level of prickly in terms of if we're comparing it with Ange, it's probably not a contest. But he does have that side to him. I've seen a lot of people saying it's not as like a charismatic or charisma driven appointment as an Ange Postecoglou. And I'm just thinking, listen to him speak, watch his press conferences, listen to the journalists who speak to him week in, week out. He is one of the best managers to speak to in a press conference. I've been to one of his press conferences before. He gives you so much more detail, and you can tell that it's not the media trained bollocks that you get from some of the other managers. So yeah, I wouldn't say he's Ange level of prickly, but he can sometimes get a bit frustrated, and that scrutiny will be massive if he doesn't get off to a good start.
I love that. Ash, I'll hand over to you. Then we're going to go to Bill, and then we're going to.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, because you know we're being pretty nice at the moment, but I wanted to know what you thought his biggest weakness was as a coach. That's what I really want to know. I want to dive into that because there are going to be some tough moments for us. And yeah, I know we've spoken about your top 6 wins and how delightful it has been, and you know we're kind of glamorizing that part of the game, but there's teams around you that you didn't quite get over the line, you dropped points against. And I want to know more about that. And you as a fan, did you think you or Frank overcomplicated things as a coach where he tweaked it a bit too much?
There's definitely been points. It's funny because I've been kind of like racking my brains in terms of what I dislike about Thomas Frank, because we're all football fans at the end of the day. But like, there has been moments in games where he's a bit slow to make substitutions. I don't know if that's like a football fan wide thing, because I feel like every single football fan will be screaming at their manager to make a substitution. And if they don't, then, you know, you should be in the dugout and not them. But if there's one thing and that Brentford fans have criticised him for, it's his treatment of the cup competitions. For a club like Brentford, and I know this is going to be different for Tottenham because you've got a bigger squad and better players, well, hopefully a bigger squad and better players. But we always felt that it wasn't something that he took very seriously. And especially this season, that's been heightened by the likes of Newcastle winning the Carabao Cup, Palace winning the FA Cup. This season, when you look to the teams that were left in the FA Cup, we all Brentford fans, we were hopping on our podcast saying, this could have been us. We bottled the Carabao Cup away at Newcastle and made about 6 changes to our starting 11. We then played Plymouth at home. We went on to knock Liverpool out as well, but we made 7 changes to that as well. So that would be an area of frustration with Thomas Frank. I hope he doesn't do that at Tottenham, because it's a sure way to get fans not offside, because we were never going to fall out of love with Thomas Frank or anything like that. But that was a big frustration in that we felt like it was going to be extremely unlikely for us to get into Europe this season, and he kind of just surrendered the cup competitions for no real reason, because obviously we did have a little bit of a run towards Europe towards the end, but. And then there has been the Fulham game away this season was painful. That was a tough one, and at home as well, to be fair. Sometimes we can sit into that low block and just kind of not really attack the opposition or look to get out. It's kind of just a panic. We're going to stay here. We're going to bring Ben Mee on. We're going to shut up shop for the last 10 minutes, and then we get punished. And maybe that one sticks out a little bit more in the memory because it was Fulham. But I think when it's just you're comparing different clubs, that's the thing. He's going to have more tools at his disposal at Tottenham.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing we do know is that with regards to cup competitions, Bill, you know, after the back of what we just had in Bilbao, I think it's fair to say that that might be one area that I think Frank will have to look at a club like Tottenham. Like you said, I think, Mike, different expectations. Bill, have you got a question for Mike from your side?
I do. I've been hearing a lot this week. I've been doing a deep dive into a few different Brentford articles, podcasts and stuff. And a name that keeps coming up is Justin Cochrane, who's obviously been away with England this week. He seems like highly regarded and stuff, and it seems like a bit of a coup for us because I know he was linked with your job. What can you tell me about him? Is he worth the hype?
To be honest, I can't tell you that much. All I can tell you is what I've read, which is what you've read as well. But he's regarded as one of the best developers in England. He's obviously at Spurs, at Man United, and is now part of Thomas Tuchel's England backroom staff. And you don't kind of get those jobs without having something about you. And you're absolutely spot on. I feel like it would have been a risk for us to really go for him. And I'm not sure the offer was ever on the table. I don't want to speculate about that. But Thomas Frank was in it. Would have been following in the footsteps of Thomas Frank because when he took over, he was the assistant to Dean Smith. So it would have been like a kind of cyclical kind of coming together or whatever. But I've been, from what I've heard, from what I've read, he sounds like a really good developer in terms of young players. And he's, from working at England as well and working at Man United and Tottenham, he's working with high level players his whole career. So you could even argue that when he took the assistant job at Brentford, it was a bit of a step down for him.
And just off the back of that as well, I know you guys have had a few different set piece coaches. I think one of them's gone to Chelsea, right? And one of them went to Man United, and the new one now is a English guy, right? I think. The one that we're getting from Man United, was he successful at Brentford?
Yeah, so Brentford were like pioneers in terms of set piece coaches, which is really annoying because Nicolas Jover at Arsenal has got more airtime this season than I think any other coach in the league. But yeah, we were the kind of first club in England to kind of bring through that and look for marginal gains. And it's all about Brentford's approach in terms of finding those marginal gains all across the pitch. We scored 5 goals from throw-ins this season. I think the next team has scored 1. So get ready for some long throws. They're a lot of fun. But yeah, Andreas Georgson was another one. So we had Nicolas Jover first, then Andreas Georgson, then Bernardo Cueva, and now we've got Keith Andrews. Jover's at Arsenal, Georgson was at Man United, Cueva's now at Chelsea, and Keith Andrews is still at Brentford. So they don't get poached for those jobs without doing it well. So yeah, the evidence is there.
Mike, I got to say, it's been an absolutely fascinating half hour of you. It's been brilliant and some amazing insight that I think many will really, really be grateful for because, it's like, well, you will know what it's like obviously very soon on the eve of having a new coach. There's so many questions that many have, and you've given us so many answers. 2 questions, if you don't mind for me to close it on.
Yep.
Number 1, brand of football, Tottenham of a rich heritage. Many love seeing front foot attacking football. Obviously, Frank has been renowned for being adaptable and flexible. Can he play a style of football that will marry both of those two together? And final point I want to ask you is, what do you feel realistically Thomas Frank can achieve at Tottenham?
I think in answer to your first question, I'll go back to what I said at the start about his preferred style of football being front foot attacking football. When we're in the Championship, if you can go watch full match replays, which you can on Brentford's website, and go look at some of the results in the games that we picked up in terms of that front three of Brian MBUEMO, Ollie Watkins, and Said Benrahma, that BMW. That football was electric, and it was all about getting the balls forward to your best players, which I think Tottenham fans will appreciate. So yeah, but he is tactically flexible, like you say. He's a pragmatist. He knows how to get points, but against the lesser teams in the division, like this season against the lesser teams in the division for Brentford, we have put them to the sword basically at every opportunity. Put 5 past Southampton, 4 past Leicester, put 4 past Ipswich. We did concede 3 against Ipswich as well, but I'll leave that bit out. And then, but yeah, like against some of the lesser teams in the division this season, we've seen that kind of Brentford with Damsgaard pulling the strings, and Maddison's probably going to drop into that role in the 10. Really excited to see what he can do under Thomas Frank in that kind of 10 role behind the 3 forwards. So yeah, what was your second question again, Ricky?
My second question was, what do you feel he can actually achieve at Tottenham in your opinion?
It's so difficult, and I feel it's so contingent on the summer. I think he's spoken before about when you go into a new club, it's all about who you can get out and who you can get in.
Right.
And I feel like that's the pressure point in terms of what he can achieve. I think all of the evidence points towards Thomas Frank being an elite coach. I think if you hear what Pep Guardiola has to say about him, I know that he does this a lot in terms of complimenting other teams and managers, but
Yeah.
He said Thomas Frank is one of the best. He said, I know a lot of things, but I know managers, and when I see a good one, it's only a matter of time for him. And now we're at that point where he's got that big move. So I don't have any doubts about his coaching ability. It all comes down to the summer for me. And obviously that might not be what Tottenham fans want to hear, but he needs to be backed in the way that he should, in the way that he deserves, because the job that he has done at Brentford over the last 5 years to keep us in the Premier League on this shoestring budget, second lowest budget in the league this season. We've been in the bottom three throughout our time in the Prem. It goes so under the radar. You don't, like, every ordinary manager doesn't do that. And Thomas Frank has done that. And the only way that Brentford have been looking since we've been in the Prem really and truly is up. There was a season last season where we finished 16th. There was a lot of injuries. So in terms of that, all of the evidence points towards Thomas Frank being a really good coach. What he can achieve with a good window, I don't think is out of reach to finish in that top 5, top 4. Hopefully get a deep run in the Champions League. This is going to be his first experience of that kind of football. But I don't want to get people's expectations too high up. We, as Brentford fans, think he's a special coach, and I'm surprised that we've managed to hang on for him for as long as we have. But yeah, I think the summer's key. I think it's a process with Thomas Frank. You've got to be patient with him. If you can get like a decent season in the league this season, kind of top half, top 8, and then kind of push on in some of the cup competitions, get into deep stage of the Champions League, and then build, then you've got a winner for me.
Mike, I've got to say, you've been absolutely amazing. We can't thank you enough. Can I just say, ladies and gentlemen, this gentleman I thought was going to be coming on and not losing his manager on the same day. And I've got to say, for those, we've got over nearly 8,000 of you that are watching this show live. There's absolutely no reason why. Will be a lot of Brentford fans as well, I'm sure. Mike, where can they find your wonderful podcast, which I implored people to go and listen and watch at the time of you losing, Frank, and your emotions and your feelings, which I thought was so eloquently put together. Where can they find the wonderful work you do for the footballing community, but for Brentford in general? Where can they find you?
Yeah, so the Ealing Road Podcast on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your pods, at the Ealing Road on Twitter, at Ealing Road Pod on Instagram. And then I've got a personal channel as well that I do TikToks on about football, about Brentford, about Spurs. To be fair, I've been farming the Spurs content over the last kind of few days. My views have gone right up, which is good. And yeah, I do YouTube as well. That's Mike Liven5, which is the handle that you can see on the screen. So yeah, cheers for having me on, boys. Appreciate it.
Mike, you've been a star. Loads of love for you. Look, the wonderful Mike there from the Ealing Road Podcast. Mike, we're going to let you go. We're going to wish you all the very, very best for the upcoming campaign. Very quickly, who do you want next for you, manager-wise?
Ange?
Yeah? You say Can?
No, I wouldn't take Ange.
Unbelievable. Listen, Mike, you've been a superstar. Thank you so much. Mike, thank you. We're going to go for our first break of the show for our listeners on audio. We're going to let Mike go. Let's hear from what is now Tottenham's official head coach, Thomas Frank, who was glorifying over some of his players during his time at Brentford. We'll be back after this short break.
I think that's a big expectation. I know they haven't had the best season, but if you look at their lineup, just take their front three, I think a lot of clubs would have taken them any day. I know more play there could be Kulusevski, but let's say their midfield, Kulusevski, Bentancur, Bissouma. That's a very, 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 very good Premier League midfield. And then I know they haven't had a centre-back, but maybe Gray and Bennett and Davies played the best defensive game of the season. So Porro is fantastic as right-back. He's got Trent-ish offensive qualities, and Spence have done very well, Kingsley. So we can't expect... If we expect that, then there's something wrong with our fans. Or something wrong with... In the Premier League, it's difficult every game.
So I'm sure we are going to get very, very shortly Thomas Frank's first interview with Tottenham. I'm sure they're working on that. Maybe they want to wait until the Friday to announce it, because that would mean a week after Andy's sacking, just speculating, who knows. Listen, thank you so much for joining us. Over, like I say, 9,000 of you watching the show live. We implore you, we encourage you, please keep liking, please keep subscribing to the show. I'm joined by the wonderful Jim from the Ethos Spurs podcast. Please give him a follow over there. Of course, they're doing some wonderful content, as is the wonderful Ash from Spurs Kings. Please keep liking, please subscribing. And we've got Billie T, haven't we? We've got to drag Billie T off a very, very, late night call, Bill, wasn't it? A late night call. I said, Bill,
yes,
come
man,
on.
Got the international call up, yeah, man.
A week earlier than what he should be. I was going to give him a week's grace and bring him back for the opening day fixtures. We're bringing him back a week earlier. A lot's happening in the world of Tottenham. Look, in this show, we do need to cover the Romero statement for those that have missed it. We've had Christian Romero finally unleash his feelings about Ange Postecoglou leaving the club. What does that mean for his future? There's obviously a lot around the element of Heung-Min Son, and it does feel, from day one, like Ange really, Frank's got a lot of work to do from that opening day in terms of what he's going to need to do when he gets into the building. But now we've had a bit of time to reflect on the appointment. Bill, you sounded very excited there in your build-up. I know you've done a lot of research on Frank. Overall, happy with the appointment now itself?
Yeah, I am. I'm happy with the appointment. I think it's, like I said, it's a sensible decision. I think you could probably look into the facts and argue the facts about maybe what it means like long term for us, because you know I've seen a lot of people argue online about the ambition that it shows, but I think he's a really sensible choice, and hopefully he'll get us back on track in the league. The reason why I fell in love with Ange so much is because of that sort of the talk that he gave about wanting to win things. And obviously he did end up getting us over the line for the first time in 17 years. And now I felt that I'm kind of addicted to that feeling of winning the trophy. So I think it's going to be a big ask for Frank, because as a fan base now, we've tasted that glory and we want more of it. And some might argue that Frank is maybe not that kind of manager. Maybe he's more of a steady hand that's going to see us maybe progress up the league a bit more over a period of time. But I'm excited to see a coach who's just like another good guy like Ange, tactical flexibility, a bit modern coach, and seeing how it goes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Obviously, he was a former favourite Spurs player. I mean, again, deliberate on that camp if you feel he's or isn't a favourite, Jim. We've had Christian Eriksen come out in this last 24 hours, of course, played for the club, was adored at one point by the fans. He said, I think he is the right coach for Tottenham. I have had various times with Thomas where, in my opinion, I've seen his ability to be adaptable and flexible. I think he is the perfect match for the football club. His personality, his way of playing, his ways of being. The club, considering where they were last season, they won a trophy, of course, but they are in the process of building something. And I'm sure that Thomas is a good man to bring that into the football club in terms of that build himself. Eriksen was asked personally if he was going to be coming back, and he said, no, not at the moment. So should Thomas call, it might be a different story. Do you feel, Jim, this is the perfect match?
I think he's a good choice. And as I've always said, good, consistent recruitment can underpin the success of most coaches. And I think the coaches we were linked with over recent seasons, I think there's a lot to be optimistic about in the high caliber of those coaches we've identified. You've got to think, I know people will be underwhelmed by Silva, who's been linked in recent seasons, this season, but in recent seasons, we were linked to Arne Slot before Liverpool. Ange were also Liverpool and Ange are also linked together under the same kind of group as well. We've seemed to be getting that talent ID a bit better from the manager perspective. And if you look deeper into the history of who else has gone after Thomas Frank in the past, and you believe what you read, reputable journalists have said that he was a whisker away from joining Liverpool when it was a 2-horse race between him and Slot. And even if you don't put faith into Spurs' manager and player recruitment, I don't think anyone would say Liverpool often make mistakes in that area. And if you're going to look at a club that gets it right most of the time, it's a club like Liverpool. And if they are in appreciation of Frank to such a degree that they are willing to back him to take over from Jurgen Klopp, which was such a hard job to do for any manager, that is something that's really good for us to look at and think, well, the chances are we've really gone and got a manager who is progressive, can maximize squad value, and is happy to work under a modern recruitment setup, which is key, absolutely pivotal to what we've moved towards. So yeah, I think he's an excellent match. The thing I think we need to just take a step back for as fans is we've won that trophy and we want more. And I want it more than anything. But we have to give this guy 3+ years to get to that stage. And I think there'll be times in the first season where, as our brilliant guest we just had on then says, you know, we've got a cup game and 5 or 6 players are rotated. And we can't understand why, you know, it's Chelsea, we've got to win this game, it's a cup. And he doesn't take it quite to the levels that Ange did when he was with us in some of those cups, because the league and establishing a foundation in the league is going to be Frank's number one priority in the first season, right? He's got to get that consistent revenue coming in, provide consistency to the board, try getting those Europa League spots as a minimum so that he can set himself up for success in transfer windows by having the revenue and the budget and the European football for the right players. And I think Frank is the type of guy who will also sit back at the start of the season and he will already have a plan for what his priorities are in every single competition. He'll have a plan for what he does when he goes 1-0 down. He'll have a plan for what he does when he goes 2-1 up. I think he'll have it all laid out meticulously. And I think Spurs have typically gone for extremes on either side of the fence and tried to find the right temperature. And as we spoke about before, I think Frank's in the middle and he's just about right. He's calm amongst chaos. And I think we just need some calm right now, especially with Romero's comments that have come out. We could be losing Son, our captain, Romero, our vice captain. We've just lost Harry Kane. We've just come 17th. We've just won a trophy. It's so Tottenham. It's just extremes in all directions. I think you need the beating heart of your team and your figurehead and your manager to come in and be a stoic, calm individual who just goes, everyone sit down and calm down. Everyone look at me. We've got a plan. And here is a vision. And here's how we're going to get there. And we're going to get there by doing these things. And I think that's what Frank's going to bring. And it's what we need right now.
I 100% agree. I hope there is a plan, Jim, because it feels like it's going to be a very, very busy summer for sure. Ash, I want to come on to you because one of the sticking points it feels that has been in these last few days is the fact of agreeing the right coaching staff for the role. And I think that's been one of the things I know where Bill asked our guest as well about this gentleman that we're going to talk about now, and that's Justin Cochrane, a man that is returning to the football club in what we understand to be a very specific role for himself. He's one of the most highly rated coaches within the game right now. And Brentford, we understand, had been eyeing him up as a potential successor to Frank. He's a strong, trusted voice in the Danes coaching setup and is also part of Thomas Tuchel's England setup and is expected to remain and do that role on a part-time basis. We understand he's a massive key cog in the wheel for Thomas Frank. How important has that been, Ash, to get the gentleman he has wanted on that coaching staff for him in coming into the role?
You know what? It's not just Justin that's arriving. It's also Chris Haslam. He's been the head of performance for 9 years for Academy Head of Sports Science. And for me, that's going to dramatically improve our injury concerns, reduce our injury concerns, sorry. So that's something I'm kind of looking forward to. And obviously the style of play, that's something we need to keep a lot of these first teamers fit. Players like Mickey van der Ven, who's suffered numerous amount of injuries last season and really did hamper our ability to defend in that first part of the season. So having players available, first team players available, quality players available are going to make a massive difference. But the fact that Justin was here before at Tottenham Stadium, he knows the club, he knows the setup, means he's going to be familiar. He's going to be able to bed in the new head coach even better. Thomas Frank is obviously a great coach, but having him alongside him, he desperately waited for him to be announced as one of his main priorities in terms of head coaches. The fact that he's going to be there, the two of them together, I think they're going to be able to speak to the players. Obviously, he's worked well with Matty Wells as well. He's been a part of the academy setup as well. So he's going to know some of the players in and around and some of the coaching staff in and around the actual setup. So I think it's very important. And the fact that he's worked at Manchester United, he's worked with Thomas Tuchel, England, he's worked with top, professionals, egos, dare I say it as well. So he's going to be able to help manage that as well. And he's going to be able to speak. I'm very interested to see the development of players because Christian Eriksen, he had the heart attack and it was horrific. And it looked like he was never going to play football again. But when he came to Brentford, I remember he was linked to us and he ended up going to Brentford. But when he did play at Brentford, I thought he was exceptional. And I thought that, Thomas Frank got the best out of him in terms of, and even when he went to Manchester United, it was because of the work they did at Brentford. That's the reason why he kind of revived his career. So I'm very interested to see how he utilizes some of our existing players and how he embeds them into the system where he thinks he can actually help them to push forward. And not only just that, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking everyone now has got a clean slate. So maybe now there's a new hunger among some of these players, a new competitiveness. Now people might be auditioning again. Players that might have been out the door are back in, and people that thought they were safe, they might not be so safe. So I kind of like that there's a new person in charge, a new voice, new ideas. And let's face it, before we had Jedinek before that was a head coach of the Academy of Under-17s in Aston Villa. And then you had Romero, who was, I think, the Hibs coach, and he got relegated. With that
Montgomery,
team.
yeah.
I mean, Montgomery, and so I know it was Ange's choice. He likes to have new coaches. He wants a new challenge. But the fact that we've got seasoned coaches that are bringing new ideas, that have worked with top professionals, I expect the level to go up. Just off the back of that alone, I've heard even small quotes about. Whether people like it or not, maybe like a Richarlison. Richarlison was digging his heels in, saying he didn't want to go. But I know that Thomas Frank's been talking highly of Richarlison. So maybe he sees a different position for Richarlison. What does that mean for Tell coming back in? Like, do we have new targets all of a sudden? Like, our guest talked about MBUEMO, saying, maybe that's not quite over, how much pull does Thomas Frank have? It'll be interesting to see what players he thinks are right and suitable for his system, or even if he doesn't think like, forget my system, I'm looking at the profiles that we have and let me build a system out of the profiles the existing profiles that we have at the moment. I think that would be interesting, rather than this is the system and you guys need to fit into it. Do you know what I mean? He's looking at the players we have and build around that. So I'm really intrigued to see how that all turns out.
Yeah, I know, Bill, for you, I see one of your massive points I saw on X has been about getting the coaching staff in for the man, giving him the best possible chance to succeed at Tottenham. Because, I mean, that again, we've both been around the block with this football club. We've seen managers that haven't been able to get the coaching staff they've needed or acquired to be able to do the job. How happy are you by the fact it does appear that the people that are coming in have been his eyes, his ears, and the people that he's been working with on a regular basis? And again, you mentioned it to the guest that we had on, Justin Cochrane, spent a decade at the club beforehand. So he's very well, known around Tottenham. He knows the club. He knows Matty Wells really, really well. How important do you think that will be in terms of knowing that relationship, hitting the ground running, and having that respect from the players as well?
I think it's massive, to be honest, and I think it's a really encouraging sign. I think only Conte is the only one that I can remember of recent history where he really, that was a big sticking point for Conte. And obviously, Conte makes huge demands in a very different way.
About 12 different players.
I mean, we brought all the coaches in for Conte, but we haven't done it for other managers. And as I said before, Ange by choice sometimes, I think, and I think a really big probably hindrance on us was this fact that we had this inexperienced coaching team set up. And it showed in some games, and it showed in some areas like set pieces, particularly in the first season. And just having a bit of, the sort of defensive openness showed quite a lot. And in particular showed in sort of the fitness and the way that Ange himself said we made mistakes in terms of the intensity and things like that. So I think it's huge. The next thing for me, I think what I want us to always do is give these managers the best possible chance of succeeding, which I think because fairly assess our owners, I think there's plenty of times where they haven't done that. It's very rare that we've had a manager and we're certain that they've been given everything they can to succeed and everything from the manager. It's very rare that happens under ownership. And I hope this positive step of giving him the coaching staff is the first step. The next step is obviously the transfer window. The coaching staff can't for nothing if we don't give this guy the tools and players that he needs. And they might lower expectations slightly in the fact that Thomas Frank can work with players really well, develop players. I hope not personally. I hope that we still have ambition to compete with, high-level transfers. We're seeing a lot of our rivals around the Premier League at the moment spending a lot of money on quality players. I think we need to now go and do the same. I want to give this guy the very best chance of succeeding at Tottenham. And the way to do that is adding quality to our squad now. So that's the next step. So I think all this coaching staff is a great start. The next step now is go and buy some quality players for him.
Amen. Totally agree. Look, we're going to fit in our next break of the show for our listeners on audio. And yes, we're going there. We're going to discuss Christian Romero's comments where his timing of them, in all ways with Romero, is so subtly timed on the very moment Tottenham released that Thomas Frank is the new manager. we had the Romero comments about Ange Postecoglou. Tell me that wasn't deliberate, Bill.
Yeah, I'm certainly sure it was. I'm looking forward to going into that. Can I just say one thing as well? I just saw someone comment.
Please.
Someone just asked, did I get the Ange tattoo? Yes, I did. It's on my leg right here. I can't show it because it's, watershed and all that, but I did get the Ange tattoo. It's there.
Bill, that's what we were waiting for. We were waiting for that. We had that confirmation. We've got the Ange tattoo.
If we win the Super Cup, I'll show it live on air.
I thought you were going to say if you win the Super Cup, you'll get Frank's name tattooed on your head or something.
Yeah, I will. I'll do that as well.
Look, we're going to go
I'll
for our next. I love that. We're going to go for our next break of the show for our listeners and audio. Let's check out Thomas Frank in action on the training ground. We'll be back with you after this very, very short break.
Yes! I like it, Frank. Brilliant. Yes. Rick! That's fine. A little bit higher, V. A little bit higher. So on the outside. Need a bounce. Yes. Okay. Time. Yes. Brilliant, Miles, Brian. Now we're there. Okay, let's go. Out, Vita. Yes. Better. Now we played a little bit more on the outside. And here where you went down there, where Chris, he just needs to go higher. Okay. So we fill in. Really good. So get those positions and make sure, for example, the outside in the back three, whoever that is, make sure we are high enough so we can take the ball forward. Then we have a back four who's defending. So we can make the breakthrough, we can attack 6 versus 5. If we lose it, we defend 4 versus 5. Love it, Wes! Play! Frankie, perfect position for the bounce, okay? Really, really good.
There you go. Thomas Frank in action. Listen, we're back with you here on Last Word on Spurs. Thank you so much for all your incredible support for Last Word on Spurs. We've got over the 8,000 to 9,000 of you watching the show live. We really, really do appreciate all your support for the show. Please keep liking. Please keep on subscribing. It's time to turn our attention to those comments that we've seen in from Christian Romero. Headline comments. Bill, look at him. He can't wait to comment. We are going to go to Bill first on these comments from Romero because I mentioned that point that they've been subtly timed. Let's bring to you those comments that Romero has made on Ange Postecoglou and his own potential future at the football club. So Romero has been speaking, as I've discussed, and the words from Romero are, which he has shared on social media, Ange, thank you for these 2 incredible seasons. You're a fantastic coach, but above all, a great person who deserves the best. From day one, you paved the way despite the many obstacles that always existed and will always exist. Beyond everything, we won a trophy. We went down in the history of this beautiful club, which is the only thing that matters. I wish you the best because you deserve the best. And thank you for everything. Let's come over to you, Bill, if we can. What do you make of those comments from Romero, the timing of them?
So this guy has definitely had that sat in the drafts all week long, waiting for the perfect moment. There is no way that this is a coincidence that as soon as Frank was announced and he's dropped it, and I respect that level of pettiness completely. I think that's brilliant. And I think the most important bit of that statement to me is not necessarily the bit about Ange, but it's the digs about Daniel Levy. They're pretty much there, staring you straight in the face, where he says these obstacles existed and they will always exist. That's a very pointed shot at the board. Now, you could probably argue it's difficult to see a way that he stays after that. We know that Daniel Levy has, doesn't take lightly to things like that, and he probably will, look to sell him now as a result of those comments. For me, I would love to see him stay at Tottenham. I think he's an incredible player. The final showed, he's a winner. There's a photo going around this week of all the trophies that he's won. I think he was man of the match in 3 consecutive finals for Argentina. And the Europa League final for us as well. This guy is a winner, and I hope we keep him because, like I said, in terms of Thomas Frank, we don't want to be sitting on the back foot by signing one of our best players straight away. So it's really interesting for me, particularly the points about Daniel Levy. But I don't think there's any coincidence on this time, and I think he's been waiting for that. And it, quite interestingly, has seemed to sort of bury the Frank news. Most people are talking about the Romero statement, which is interesting. But I definitely saw the most significant part of me was the shot at Daniel Levy. That was huge for me.
Yeah, I mean, again, just the wording that he's used there, coming over to you, Jim, on that, you paved the way despite the many obstacles that always existed and always will exist.
Yeah.
What's your takeaway, Jim, with the wording of
that
Romero?
Like, there's no way, as Billy said, that this was anything else than deliberate. He's had that in the draft. He's gone back and forth and deliberated over whether he got the wording right on that. And it's like when you're having a conversation with someone, normally a sibling or a relative, who's trying to kind of had an inverted dig at you without saying what they're really thinking out loud because you're surrounded by other relatives. Do you know what I mean? But they know you well enough to know how to get the message across in a way that only you understand. And I feel that's kind of what Romero's done there. The bit that's subjective is why. Like, why has he done that? And I think we'll have a view on that. Some will say because he's a serial trophy winner and he believed in the mission he was on with Postecoglou, and that was taken away from him. Some will say it's an accumulation of this whole tenure at Tottenham and what's happened under other managers and in transfer windows or whatever it may be. And you could even say it's simple as though someone like Atletico Madrid, who have been strongly linked to him, really want him, but financially they're not in a position to get him unless he lowers his own unless Spurs lower the asking price. And we know what the tactics are in football. If a player wants to lower their own asking price, they make themselves unpleasant to be around and they give additional reasons beyond money to kind of force a move and an exit. And I think he's kind of done that. It did kind of feel like there were always going to be pros and cons to moving on from Postecoglou and moving into Thomas Frank now. And I think Frank was the right appointment always, but whether he was right now or right in 6 months or next season, that's the debatable bit that we could go in loops around and just endlessly argue about. So let's not bother doing that because there's pros and cons to all those options. And I feel like the upside to clinging on to the Postecoglou project another few months was probably that Romero was going to go, okay, I'm going to see out just one more season with Spurs. I think that felt more likely. But then again, we can't guarantee that. We don't know for sure. He might just be using this as an easy excuse to add fuel to the flames and an additional reason to get out. So yeah, it's clearly on purpose. It's to help force a move. Why he wants to move will be down to your opinions. And I'm sure it will come out because Romero is the type of player that when he does move on, he'll go to a media interview and he will not hold back. He will say exactly what he thinks when he's got nothing to lose and he won't care. I just, Billie, I don't know about you, I've got this image. You've seen that t-shirt of Postecoglou and Romero drunk on a sofa with a cigar. I can just imagine them with that, but also a phone in their hand, just drafting that message at 10 p.m. and then just Ange like, send it, mate. Send it, mate. Send it, mate. Go on. Wait.
It's in much better English than Romero usually is used to. So they, could certainly be a ghostwriter involved. I think it's a really interesting point that Jim makes there about trying to lower the asking price, because I think if there's one thing, I can say plenty about Daniel Levy, but that tactic is not going to work with him, is it? So it's just, if anything, you'll probably put the price up. He's that kind of guy. So I don't. If that is the game that he's playing, it's not going to work with Daniel Levy. So say what you like about Daniel Levy, but this guy is not going to fall for tactics like that.
What's your gut feeling telling you, Ash, on the back of those words from Romero? Is that a parting shot? Is that, again, a kind of, dig about ambition or lack of loyalty towards Ange for not keeping to the third season? How do you interpret and take those comments away for you?
First of all, I think it's petty, but I like it. I feel like it's Kendrick petty.
Do you like the fact that he's standing up to the ball, to Daniel Levy?
Yeah, because he's asking a question. He's saying, if you are serious, if you're a serious club, and you want to match my ambition, because I want to go to a big club. I want to go to a club that's ambitious. That's the reason why I'm trying to go out. That's why I'm trying to leave. Clubs are interested in me with ambition. If they match my ambition, I will go out to these clubs and I will find a home there. But if you're serious about keeping me, you will show me the ambition and you will go out and you will sign those quality players that I've criticized the board before, because it's not the first time he's criticized the board.
No, he has criticized them for their lack of ambition when it's come to certain windows. But do you think is this beyond this situation? Is this beyond Thomas Frank being able to resolve this? Does it go higher up than Frank? And I mean, of all due respect.
Yeah, no, of course it's higher than Frank, but at the end of the day, like he can sit down, Thomas can have a conversation, and I think Romero will be like, "Look, it's nothing personal. Do you know what I mean? I don't know you. Do you know what I mean? But I've been here for the best part of 6+ years, and I've come and I've seen a lot of things, and from my point of view, I haven't seen the ambition that I think that the level of quality player that I am. I don't see the match, and his countrymates will be asking him, what's going on with Tottenham, what's going on there? Like, are you staying there? Are you leaving? I think you should be at a bigger.
McAllister came out, didn't he? And said he
The
wants
McAllister came out. Yeah, he said
sign Romero.
Yeah, he said he was one of the best players that he's played with, one of the best centre backs in the world. So, and it's not just him. I think it was De Paul as well at Atletico Madrid.
Messi said it recently again.
So it's bro, there's no smoke without fire, is what I'm saying, Ricks. Yeah, it's clear as day. We can dress it up all we want, but he's told us in so many ways, like there's no other way to call it. When the kettle is black, it probably is. And that's what I think.
The elephant in the room for me, I've always thought this about Romero. The Romero situation is the price tag. Like, I don't think Atletico Madrid can afford him at the moment. I really don't.
No, not do I. I don't think so.
I don't think
many 100 million already.
I think what I will say, it is a real shame that we've just appointed a manager, and the subject talking point is the vice captain. I mean, we've literally appointed a manager less than 4 hours ago, and here we are talking about Romero.
I feel like, Ricky, though, I'll be honest with you. I feel like this is a new era. So you're going to see some of the old guards move away. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's time it's going to be a big shake-up. And I think the club has been hinting that, it's going to be one or two players that people might be surprised that are leaving. And I think it might be the case of, I remember when I was a young kid, I was watching Transformers, and Optimus Prime died, bro. I was upset, like, showing my age now. And then Rodimus Prime had to take over. So I feel like there's a new leader. There's going to be a new captain picked. And I think this is going to be Frank's way. I think it's going to be a new Spurs, in my opinion.
And I think if you are the manager of a Big Six club, I hate the term Big Six, but it is what it is.
It is.
This is the kind of thing you're gonna have to deal with all the time. Day one, Romero's kicking up a fuss, transfer links to Son there straight away.
Have you ever this is when they say a manager's job starts immediately. I mean, literally, they put the announcement out, and Romero's put that out. I mean, does that only happen at Tottenham?
It's a bit like when Nuno joined and Kane was on strike straight away.
Exactly. I was about to say that.
That's what happens at these clubs, man. That's what happens when you go to a big club.
Didn't Kane just say he'd switched his phone off by mistake or something?
Yeah.
2 days. So some really flaky excuse.
They're talking about when Ryan Mason took over interim. The Super League thing happened immediately after that. So when you step up to the plate, it changes.
Yeah. Look, I do want to close it on Thomas Frank, because at the end of the day, he's just got himself what he will argue has been, well, no doubt about it, and for us as well, for him, his biggest job of his career. I asked the guys actually on the previous show, what would be the advice you'd give him, Jim, if you could speak to Thomas Frank beforehand and you had a piece of advice? What would be your advice for Thomas Frank going into the Tottenham job?
There's a lot of frustration, anxiety, and other emotions swirling around that fan base out there that are nothing to do with you. And some of that is going to get projected onto you. And as the board, or whoever I am in this fictional situation talking to Frank, maybe I've replaced Daniel Levy. We've started crowdfunding and I've been put in charge for some bizarre reason. But I've got your back through this period. Regardless of how we start, I want you to have a secure platform to implement what you want to implement, because we've brought you in because we believe in you, and we want you to have all the tools possible to succeed. Now, there's also going to be players who are coming to the end of certain cycles, and those are influential players in that dressing room. And you can tell us what you want to do with those players, and we will back you all the way in those decisions. If you feel people are disruptive, we will move them on. If you feel you can turn people around, we will keep them, and we will ignore offers. You have our full and utter backing to do what you need to do, and we will be completely unwavering in that with you through the way. I'd say something along those lines. And I'd say, we need to look at the positives here as Spurs fans.
Yep, of course.
Frank is in a situation where, for the first time in a long time, we're saying top 6, 7, 8, as long as we see improvements in team cohesion and a plan and a vision, we're fine with that. It's not top 4 on a trophy as a minimum standard. The fact we've got players attracting the interest of Real Madrid still in our squad means you've either got a very good player or you're about to get a lot of money for a footballer.
Yep.
Both not too bad. You're better to be in that situation than just have someone you can't sell, right? So Spurs, I think, are in the right place for someone like Frank to come in right now. And I don't think you'd want him in a position where everything's fully built and I need you to take us to the next level. I think you want Thomas Frank when you're like, I need someone to bring some sense and reason to a very complex situation. And he's the man. And I don't think it's going to be a complete rebuild that we use that term. I think it's going to be okay, we've built the foundations. Now, how do we put the stairs in? Like, it's kind of like, how do we get to that next bit now? And I think he's the right man to show us and come in with a plan already and how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, the key thing that we spoke about already is the fact that he's got that coaching staff in place. Ash, what would be your one message if you could give one to Thomas Frank?
Wow, welcome, first of all. Welcome to Tottenham Hotspurs, man. You're going to be a part of our gang. And it's as simple as if you win the games, you'll win our hearts over very quickly. And there's a reason why you are in this position, because of your ideas, your mantra, your philosophy, what you believed in, and your ability to execute it has brought you thus far. And I think if you carry on in the manner you are, there's a reason why you're so loved and respected in the football community outside of the Spurs community. Because whether we think you're good or not, it doesn't matter. The higher ups and the people in other circles, as Jim has already eloquently said about Liverpool having 2 options, one being Slot, who just won the league with them, and then his name was mentioned. That for me says it all. And Manchester United, Chelsea interested. A lot of rival fans have been messaging me saying, you know, this is a good appointment. It was similar to when we got Conte. You know, people were funny about Mourinho because Mourinho was coming towards the end. Conte was more or less out of work, but he still had something about him. But I think with Thomas Frank, because a lot of these top sides have, you know, lost against him and he's figured out a way to do it, they all respect him. And he's just got to remember that no matter what, he knows who he is and he can make his trajectory as far as he wants. Like, stars are the limits. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Love that. Bill, you're always good for a one-liner. No
I do actually have some pertinent advice, actually. So we're a crazy fan base, but we're also a really loyal fan base, and we will get behind someone, as we always do, you know, if things are going well. And I think the biggest place where you can make a quick gain with our fan base, right? I want us, you know, I think with Tottenham fans, if the fans see that the team is competitive, they're having a go, they're playing attacking football, they'll get right behind him. And we are the only football club in this country that plays 6 derbies a season. West Ham, Chelsea and Arsenal. Ange had a horrific record in those derbies, an absolutely horrific record. If you make us competitive in those derby games, get a win over Arsenal, win over Chelsea, that'll go a massive way with our fan base. So my advice would be, make us competitive in those derbies, get some points against Arsenal, Chelsea, because it's been a long time since we beat Arsenal. Beat Chelsea. Yeah. It's been a very long time. And that's a way you can win over our fan base very, very quickly. Like I said, we're the only team in the country that plays 6 derbies a season. Let's go get some wins in some of those.
Love that, Bill. Totally agree on that. You know, he had some real high praise from, again, long-standing people in the game. You guys, I think, mentioned Jurgen Klopp earlier. Jurgen Klopp said on Frank, you know, he plays against possession teams one way and plays against other teams when all of a sudden they're a possession team themselves. It's really interesting. He's a cool guy. I respect him a lot. Guardiola has said he's one of the best. Thomas, I tell you, he's one of the best. And he was asked if he was surprised that up until Tottenham, a big club hadn't snapped him up. He said, look, it's a question of time. He will get it. They will get a good manager. I'm good in a few things, but in rating managers which are good, I know which ones are. Thomas is. Final question, I want to close it on to all of you. Season expectations. We know there's a lot that's going to be going on. From what we're hearing, one of Thomas Frank's first jobs will be to decide on the futures of both Christian Romero and Heung-Min Son. Obviously, the last time we touched on Heung-Min Son, he was more keen than potentially ever to leave the football club. On that basis, given the upheaval that's going to be happening, you feel, over across the summer and what he needs to do, Jim, what do you feel is a realistic target in the first season for you?
I think it's top 8 for me. And like the thing he's got to also do on top of that is establish a new leadership group, because even though we adore Sonny, and even if you adore Romero, I think you should say, you've got players in the end of their contracts and in either the prime in one case of his career or the end of the other. They are not looking for a new project at that phase of their career with their contracts like that. So when you're entering a 3-year plan with someone, they're going, well, I'm only going to be here for year 1 and the good stuff comes in year 3 or 2. So I don't really see the benefit of me being fully motivated behind that. So I think Frank's got to establish a new leadership group and set some foundations where we go, right, as a fan base as well, I can understand where you're going with your tactics and take us on that journey as well. I think because we've been in such extremes in recent seasons, I think we're going to really benefit from a manager who goes, by the way, here's why I did it, and just taking us through very transparently. And I hope he continues to do that. So for me, it's top 8, clear communication to the fans, and an understanding of where we've been through on our journey as well, and establishing the right core leadership group for us moving forward.
I think those first interviews will be so crucial when we hear the words of Frank, because a lot of people instantly connect with him for sure on how he'll come across. Ash, for you, what's a realistic expectation for this season and what he's going to have to do across the summer as well? We can't get away from that.
Yeah, I'm looking to be honest. I'm listening to the Brentford fan because he knows more about Thomas Frank than I do. And I actually thought also that we would be in and about maybe like that top 8th. But I'm going to go a little bit different. I'm going to say he's going to get us some type of Europe. That's what I think. I think that's what the board want. I think that's what his objectives would be behind closed doors. I think he will have his own goals. I think that's what he'll be aiming to do, push us right back up the table. But I think more than anything, he will want performances, and I think that's what fans want. And that's how they get behind Thomas Frank. There's one thing like winning games, or another thing losing. But if you're losing and you're showing some type of fight, some type of heart, players are playing for the manager, because, he mentioned man management skills. We want to see that. Do you know what I mean? Him getting the best out of players. And then once we see that connection and we can say, all right, we didn't win today, but my goodness, look at that attack. We really gave it a good go. That's when I think fans will start to buy into the project.
I hope so. And again, Ash, so many important points there that factor into what you're saying, and 100% agree. Bill, what for you again? Again, like a lot of these guys here that go week in, week out to Spurs, seem to get older. What for you do you need to see in season 1 that's going to give you confidence, optimism that we're going to get past season 2 and hopefully get into season 3 with a manager, which feels such a long time ago? You mentioned about London derbies. I agree. That's a crucial element to it. But expectations overall for the season, what do you need to see?
I don't want to put a league position on it, and I think Ash is exactly right. It's about the performances for me. I want us to go into games being competitive. I think one of the things that I've always respected about Brentford is they're always having a go, but no matter who they're with, they're ready to get thrashed. They're always competitive. They're always difficult to beat. They're always in the game. You know what I mean? They're always a really tough side. I want to see that from Tottenham. I want to see them develop some. But we've got a core group of young players that have been touted, coming up through the academy groups. We won the league a couple of years ago. Really highly regarded youngsters in Bergvall, Moore, Archie Gray. I want to see him develop some of those youngsters and then give us a platform to win trophies in the next 2-3 years. I'm not stupid. I'm not saying that we're going to finish top 4 and win a trophy this year, or we should go. But I just want a Tottenham team to be competitive, to give us good, because we've been through it last season, haven't we? We did ultimately end in Bilbao. We had to sit through 22 losses to get there. I just want a football team that I can go up and watch. I know they're going to turn up and compete. And then we build on there for trophies. And like I said before, a win against Arsenal will be extra sweet because it's been a very long time, man.
Yeah, and he's been good at masterminding victories against, as we know, the top 4, the top 6, like, Mike told us. Look, guys, obviously, an emergency podcast with
Yeah,
all
what
ranting.
though, he's got a chance to win our biggest ever trophy in his first
Yeah.
game. So
True.
that would be mad, wouldn't it? Imagine if he
Wouldn't it be
somehow
crazy?
be the
I
best
tell
team
you
in the world. What
that would be
strange things have happened. That would take the pressure off a bit, wouldn't it, man?
It would.
Have another
I don't know.
another
We might add
parade.
the extra
Another parade.
expectations. I don't know. People might think,
I've
we're gonna
already
win the
got my-
Champions League now.
Replica
Super-
Europa trophy on the way. I'm going to have one of them as well. But yeah.
Make some room for it, Jim. Put it on the shelf. Guys,
No.
there you are. Like I say, we've touched upon it all for you. Thomas Frank is Tottenham Hotspur's new head coach. He has put pen to paper on a 3-year contract. His first day in the job, God help him. First day has seen Romero drop an absolute bollock of a tweet, which you'll have to deal with. It's only Tottenham. And of course, Heung-Min Son, the captain's future, up in the air. It wouldn't be Tottenham if there wasn't things to do, right? Or things to sort out. I want to say a massive thank you to the wonderful Jim from Also Spurs. Jim, thank you so much. It's a marathon effort at the moment. God, thank you so much, Jim. I'm sure you've got some wonderful content over there on Also Spurs as well coming up, I'm sure. Right? Am I right in saying that, Jim?
Yeah, well, if you're into the finance stuff, we've got a good episode dropping tomorrow, which will take you through kind of our cash flow, how much we can spend at the moment based on the FFP and PSR rules. But I've crucially compared it to the top 6. I'm not going to stop using top 6. I agree with you, Billy. I think it's the big 6. I'm going to say the 6 clubs playing in Europe next season who are based in England compared to those teams and where they're all ranking on their PSR and FFP, because some of them are breaching it at the moment, which can be really interesting to watch. So that'll be up there. And my passing thing is to be really excited about for the coming season is we have soul as Tottenham Hotspur that Chelsea and some other rivals don't have, in the sense that we are proud and we will never get away from it, Spurs fans. We've been in a session of seeing our young players from our academy come through and do well in the first team.
Yep.
And I believe we believe in seeing that progressive pass and not always buying your solution. And I think we're going to get that in ample supply under Thomas Frank. And we're going to really enjoy seeing some of those players, some of our own, and be able to sing you one of our own many, many more times under his stewardship.
Amen. Fingers crossed. Ash, thank you so much. We've been covering it for a lot of the week this, so can't thank you enough for jumping back on. We've got the announcement. Done deal. Frank's the man. Time to back him, right? Time to back him.
Yeah. And I'm doing a series, man. I'm just trying to sort it out right now. I'm going to do a series on how to fix Tottenham.
God.
Langer needs my help, so I'm going to be looking at a few players we should bring in over the next few weeks in the summer.
Love that. Love that. Ash, make sure you tune in for more of that on Spurs Kings TV. Thank you so much, Bill. We'll see you for next week for the fixture release show, where we'll know exactly when those London derbies will drop and what's coming our way and how we're going to navigate it in the world of Tottenham. I'm sure in the world of Tottenham we'll know more next week, right, as we always will.
Yes, mate. Look forward to it. I couldn't believe when you texted me saying fixtures next week. It's too soon. We need a break from the football club. We need a break. But
I'm not going to buy anything yet. I need to have something. Listen, I want to say back to the wonderful Billie T. Billie T, of course, over on X. Make sure you give him a like and a follow on there. There you go, guys. Look, of course, when there's more news, we'll bring it to you. But right now, we have got a manager confirmed, approved, secured. He's even got his own coaching staff. What's going on? Thomas Frank, 3-year deal. Can he get the season 3? We'll see. From myself, from Jim, from Ash, from Bill, we've been the last one on Spurs. Keep liking, keep subscribing, keep safe, keep well. And as always, come on, you